Welcome back to Real Talk with DMJ. Well, today I have a legacy, a historian, and a powerful man who we've all been waiting for me to have on this show. He is the co-founder of the Black Panther Party. He also is an author. I'd like to welcome Mr. Elmer Dixon.
Thank you.
Well, you know, we're so excited of having you on this show. And our audience want to know about your life. It seemed like you've been an activist from the beginning. While you're in high school, and back in 1968, you started the Black Student Union. And then after that, you just flourished. Can you share with us, starting, the Black Panther Party? But first, let's hear about the Black Student Union.
Well, life has an interesting pattern to it. You don't really know the things that are happening in your life, how they're connected, and how they will manifest in things that you do. I was born in 1950 in Chicago on the South Side in an all-black hospital. My mother told me that when I came out and the doctor slapped me on the behind that I bit his finger as much as I had gums at that early age. But maybe that's probably where it started. But later, as a 5-year-old, when we were in Champaign, Emmett Till was murdered. And in fact, I was born and raised, at least in those early years, in the same neighborhood that Emmett Till came from.
Oh.
So when Emmett was murdered, my father, who had, recently, 10 years before then, 5 years before I was born, returned from fighting in World War II in the South Pacific. And he was a poet in his own right, and wrote a poem because he, as many people around the country, and Black people in particular, were devastated at the murder of Emmett. My parents were not what I would call activists, but they were aware, and they were aware of what was going on around them. Today, right-wingers call it being awoke.
Yes.
Which is, the definition of awoke is, being aware of who you are.
Yes.
And being aware of your the circumstances surrounding you. So there's really nothing wrong with being awoke. If you're not awoke, you're asleep.
Yes.
My parents were awoke. And so they made sure when we moved from Chicago when I was 7 to Seattle, which is where I was raised, at the height of the civil rights movement. In fact, Emmett's murder was a trigger moment for the civil rights movement. And so growing up in a melting pot neighborhood in Madrona, I call it melting pot because while we were in the CD, we were in Madrona. We lived a block from the Red Line. We didn't know it was a red line at that point. But all of the kids in
can I stop you right there real quick? What is the Red Line? Explain.
Redlining is the illegal practice of drawing a line around an area where Blacks, Latinos, people of color could only live in that area and could not move outside of that area.
Oh.
And there was an illegal practice that was perpetrated by not only realtors, but also by lending agencies, mortgage companies. So this literally, a red line is drawn around this area on a map. And mortgage lenders and real estate agents were instructed not to sell Black people homes outside of that area. So we were kind of hemmed in. That's the redlining. That's the illegal practice of redlining, which in a lot of ways is still practiced today, but
in a different way.
In a different way, but then it was literally a red line. So we lived a block from the red line. But everybody in that park, we lived across the street from a park, Madrona Park. They were Japanese, they were Chinese, they were Latino, they were Black, they were white, rich and poor, because the rich white kids that were across the line, again, we didn't know the line was there, would come up and play in the park as well. In fact, my 2 best friends are white. So anyway, the experience of being in that multicultural environment really prepared me for the struggles that I would be a part of later on, including the Black Panther Party, because we had a multicultural platform, as most people don't understand. And then later, as a professional, as I became joined an organization, a company called Executive Diversity Services, is preparation. And so, unbeknownst to me, and my parents would make sure that every evening when something occurred across the country in the civil rights movement, that we saw it on the TV on the evening news. The Pettus Bridge, the Bloody Sunday, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church, the murder of Medgar Evers. I often tell people that I grew up in an era of assassinations. Kennedy's assassinations, the assassination of Malcolm X, and eventually MLK, but I was a teenager by then. But all of those things really were stirring inside of me. In fact, there's a social psychologist by the name of Morris Massey, who actually coined the phrase age cohorts and did the first study on generational differences. And he coined the phrases veterans, boomers, Gen Xers, Nexters, and so forth. And in his initial work, which is all in video form, by the way.
Yes.
If your audience wants to look up Morris Massey, they'll find his work on video form. His first video was called You Are What You Were When. And what he states in that video is that based on the events that are happening in your life around you during the decade between when you're turning 10 and 20 years old, to the extent that you're exposed to them, that those events would shape most of your values, which will stay with you for the rest of your life, unless you have what he calls a significant emotional experience. So this was a culmination of things. I was not an activist early on. I was a kid growing up.
Yes.
Riding my skateboard, throwing eggs at cars, getting into trouble, going to school, got pretty good grades. And it was in 1967 that a guy by the name of Stokely Carmichael came to Seattle. Stokely Carmichael, at that point, was the national spokesperson for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC. His predecessor was H. Rap Brown. And he was a fiery speaker. And my brother got wind that he was coming and told me, my older brother Aaron said, we need to go hear this cat. And so I'm 17 years old, and I said, okay, yeah, I didn't know what it was about. And we get in there, and it's at Garfield High School. Seemed like every young black person across the city was trying to squeeze into that gym. They had to put speakers outside. So because there was overflow crowd. And I remember, his message very clearly. And he said that the reason why black people don't have any freedom is because you don't love yourself. You've been conditioned to hate yourself. You hate everything that's black. And he gave several of the analogies.
I agree with that. Yes.
He said several of the analogies that you've probably heard before. You turn on the TV set, the good cowboy wears white, rides a white horse named Trigger, and wears a white 10-gallon hat. The bad cowboy rides a black horse, wears black outfit, has a dirty black hat on, and his name was Dirty Bart. You go to the movie, the good knight rides a white horse and has a white flag, and the bad knight has a black horse and a black flag. So you go to a restaurant, you order dessert, and angel food cake is white and devil's food cake is black. And he said even when you want to get clean, you want to get the black off. He said you got to go to the grocery store and buy a soap called White Magic. And there was a soap called White Magic.
It was, and Ivory was the next one.
And so Ivory was another one. So he made all of those examples, and at first I kind of scoffed at it because I misunderstood what he was saying. To me, I thought initially that he was talking about this is black against white, and that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying that in order to love yourself, you had to hate white folks. That's not what he said. He said you need to love yourself first.
Yes.
And so as I started thinking about that, I recalled on the playground, that very playground that I mentioned earlier, that if we were out there playing and someone called you black, Those were fighting words. I ain't black. What you talking about? Because we had been conditioned to think that everything black was bad. And so that was really my awakening moment. In fact, I ended up joining SNCC that summer, became the co-chair of the Seattle chapter of SNCC. And when we got to high school, and this is leading up to your question. I'm sorry, but I'm a storyteller.
No, go right ahead because we want to hear it.
When we got to high school, me and my buddies, for our senior year, I often think about the way that I was dressed then must have been a shock to my friends at Garfield, both black and white. Because prior to then, when I came to school, when I was a sophomore or a junior, I looked like a blippy. You know what a blippy is?
No, I do not. Tell us.
A blippy is a black hippie.
Oh, okay. I never heard that.
And I had jeans on. I had no socks. I had penny loafer shoes with a penny in the little gap there. And I had a jean jacket that I had sewn an iron cross on. I didn't even know what the iron cross meant, but it was like it was chains and that kind of stuff. I looked like a blippy, black hippie. But when I showed up for my senior year, and all summer to start to grow the afro out.
Yes.
And so the afro my little afro was shaping up. And I had black pants on. I had and my buddies, we had prepared. I had a dark blue jacket, and on the back were the initials SNCC SNCC. And I had dark shades. I looked like a version of Stokely.
They was wondering what the hell was coming.
And so we immediately declared that we needed a black student union. And we went to the principal and said, we want to form an organization, a black student union. He told us no.
That was in 1968, correct?
This is 1967. This is the fall of 1967.
Oh, okay.
And so we decided, well, we were going to disrupt things. And so at the pep assemblies, I was going to be the focal point because I played in the jazz band, or at that point for the pep assemblies, they were called the stage band, but it was a jazz band. And so when the national anthem was supposed to be played and the Pledge of Allegiance, I sat down, did not stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. When it came time to play the national anthem, I didn't play. And so my buddies were doing it in the stands. They were sitting down as a protest. Well, I was the one that was the focal point. Everybody could see me. They couldn't see out of the, 800 or 900 students in the audience. They couldn't see who was sitting down and who wasn't. So I was the one that got kicked out of school. Oh. So my dad had to bring me back up. And the band instructor told me, so look, if you're going to be in the band, you got to play. You got to play the national anthem. So I said, fine. So the next week at the pep assembly, I sat down and played the national anthem. So I played it, but I sat down and played it. So I got kicked out of school again. My mother brought me back up, and she recalled that the principal said to her, look, Mrs. Dixon, can't you make him just stop? And she said, I can't make him do anything. So the next week, we took it to another level. So right after the national anthem, Pledge of Allegiance, I started a chant because, again, I was the focal point because I was down in front of all of the people, and my cohorts were in the audience, and I started the chant. I said, bing, bing, and they were my echo, bing, bing. And I said, bang, bang, and they were my echo, bang, bang. I said, Ungawa, and they said, Ungawa. And I said, Black Power. And the whole student body just erupted. It screamed and yelled and cheered. And it was
they
like
said,
they were freaking
what did he start?
Needless to say, I got kicked out of school again. And so we went down to the school district's office, and we had a young sister that was with us who, she probably was a sophomore at the time, and she was very light complected, had her little afro on. She was a fireball. She got up in the superintendent of public instruction's face and said, we demand the BSU. And he said, it's up to your principal. So we went back to the school and we said, okay, we're calling an all-school boycott of classes. So that next Monday or whatever day it was, and the word had spread, and when the 8 o'clock bell rang and it was time to go to class, nobody went to class. See, what the administration had had not understood or miscalculated was that all of those Asian kids, the Japanese kids, the Chinese kids, the white kids, we'd all gone to grade school and junior high school together. And now we're at high school at Garfield as seniors. They all knew who we were. We all knew each other.
Yes.
And so when we called the all school boycott of classes, nobody went. So the whole front of Garfield's in the hallways in front of the principal's office was jammed with students. And of course, after a minute, the principal stuck his head out and said, "Okay, you can have a BSU." And so we became the first high school black student union on the West Coast of the United States. That's how it was organized.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, I was looking at you and I keep looking at you and I see this Black Panther on this shirt. Can you say something, tell me about that?
People ask about this shirt. It is a Black Panther. I found it in Cabo San Lucas. There's an artist down there that does this kind of work. And in fact, I brought another artist. He made a metal sculpture of a panther, which I brought back on my last trip down there. But it's just a representation of who I am.
What was the purpose of starting the Black Panther?
Well,
because people need to know the truth.
Absolutely. So a little bit of history. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale co-founded the Black Panther Party for self-defense in 1966, October of 1966.
Yes.
And they were students at Merritt College in Oakland. And they had become politicized and were really wondering where the next step in the civil rights struggle was going to be, because of all of the lynchings, the bombings, the beatings, the nonviolent approach. The needle had not moved. Yes, the 1965 Civil Rights Act was born, but that didn't end discrimination. That did not create the God-given human rights that we all felt that we needed. And not just civil rights, the right to sit on the same toilet as someone white, the right to sit in a restaurant, the right to buy a home in the neighborhood that you wanted. Those were civil rights, but those were not our human rights. And so they were frustrated with where this next step was, and they were inspired by Malcolm X. Not by Martin Luther King, and I don't disparage anything that King did. He was needed and did
during that era and that time.
Yes, and in fact, we marched with King, my brothers and I and my sister, with our parents when I was 11 years old. But King's philosophy was, if someone slaps you on the cheek, turn the other cheek and let them slap the other side, which came from Gandhi's theory, Gandhi's philosophy. And but Malcolm said that if someone slaps you on the cheek, slap him back. And see, people misconstrued that to be violence. And as Malcolm articulated, that's not violence, that's called self-defense. And I realized on the playground that I keep mentioning that if I went out there and someone slapped me upside the head and I said, "Go ahead and slap the other side," that I would have been bullied all of my childhood.
Yes.
So you had to stand up and stand up against bullies. So when Huey and Bobby organized the Black Panther Party for self-defense, they first wanted to acknowledge an organization that had come before them called the Deacons for Defense, or the Lowndes County Freedom Association, which was in Alabama. And that organization had the panther as a symbol. And Huey and Bobby wanted that panther as a symbol because a Black Panther is not an aggressive animal. It's a defensive-minded animal. If you see a Black Panther in the zoo, they're trying to hide from you. You're lucky to spot one because they're not out there in the open walking around. They're in the back because they don't want to be bothered. And it's the same thing in the jungle. They don't want to be bothered. But if you step into their territory, if you look like you're going to harm their cubs, then they're going to attack. They're going to attack with ferocity to defend themselves and to defend their territory. That's the nature of a Black Panther, to be defensive. So they called this. So they went and met with the Lowndes County Freedom Association. They gave them the blessing to use the panther as a symbol, and they founded the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense to stand up and defend Black people and to organize a Black political party that would represent the needs of Black people, because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were not representing the needs of the people, not representing the needs of our people, of the Black community. So it was a political organization that they originally intended to organize and called it the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. That was in April of 1968. And right around that time when they formed the Black Panther Party, a young Black man by the name of Denzel Dowell was murdered by police on a police corner. And so Huey declared that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. And he said, we will control our own narrative. We will create our own newspaper, because we're not going to have other people write about us and tell lies. We'll tell our own truth through the Black Panther Party and the Community News Service. And he said the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to launch what we call community survival programs. Survival programs pending revolution. And so the very first survival program was the Police Alert Patrol. And that was where the members of the Black Panther Party would arm themselves with shotguns and law books and go out into the community and patrol the police. And this is where the legend of Huey P. Newton was born, and the Black Panther Party. On the streets of Oakland, if you can imagine a Saturday night in West Oakland with juke joints and restaurants up and down the boulevard, and on Friday night, people come out, to have a good time. In fact, Lou Rawls sang in a song on Friday, the eagle flies on Friday. You know what that's a reference to? That's payday. The eagle flies on Friday, and Saturday night we go out to play. And so Black people have always been culturally a gathering people, where they get out and they party and they gather. And in fact, some cities back in that time, around 67, 66, had passed a law that tried to pass these little ordinances that said 3 or more Black people on the street corner compromises a riot. And in an effort to try to keep Black people from coming together. Well, of course, that's ludicrous. So picture is Saturday night, Black people out on the street, in the juke joints, in the restaurants, having a good time. And a cop car comes and sees a tipsy guy, a brother kind of tipsy, and they grab him and say, straighten up, what's wrong with you? What you didn't do? What you got in your pockets? And they throw him up against the car. And they start hitting him with the billy club. Spread your legs. And out of the shadows marched 10 members of the Black Panther Party in leather jackets, berets, powder blue shirts, shotgun in one hand, a law book in the other. And they land right up on the side of the curb of the street. And they're standing there at attention, and they're observing. And the cop looks up and he says, "What are you niggas doing with them guns?" And Huey says, California law number 782-521 says that we have a right to bear arms. We have a right to observe you carry out your duty. And if you attempt to brutalize that brother, we're going to stop you.
And we're going to hold it right there.
Okay.
And wrap this up. We're going to go ahead and have Mr. Elmer Dixon back again for part 2. Because there's so much that we want to know about the Black Panther Party. Who did it protect, and where are they now? And more about Mr. Elmer Dixon. Stay tuned for part 2.